The spirit of adventure flies the Russian flag as we arrive in St. Petersburg. This is a place I have wanted to visit since I was about 7, after seeing a film of the Bolshoi Ballet performing Swan Lake.
Stark tenement blocks surround the harbour. As we drive through the city, we can see that the quality of construction is very low.
The standard of the older buildings creates a strong contrast between the era of affluence and the monotony of the communist regime that replaced it.
The golden-spired building is the Tower of the Admiralty, and the large building to the lower right is one of the 6 forming the State Hermitage Museum, founded in 1764 by Catherine the Great on the banks of the River Neva.
The portico of St. Isaac's Cathedral, which can hold a congregation of 1,400. Not realizing that we were stopping for a brief viewing from the outside, I photographed this image of St. Isaac's from the bus.
The dome and bell towers of St. Isaac's. We learnt later that no photography is allowed inside, so we were not that disappointed that we had not been in. As with the whole building, the sculptures and decoration are on a massive scale. These are the main doors.
A statue to Peter the Great, a title he bestowed upon himself. He was Peter the First. He is credited with dragging Russia out of the medieval times to such an extent that by his death in 1725, Russia was considered a leading Eastern European state. 2 views of the Admiralty Tower. Behind this lies the River Neva, at almost its widest point in the city. It is iced over from mid-December to April, with no shipping possible during this time.
Crossing the Neva again, we can look back at the Hermitage Museum.
This marvelous Russian-style church was built on the spot where Emperor Alexander II was assassinated in March 1881. Once the decision had been taken to build a church on the spot where the emperor was mortally wounded, building took place between 1883 and 1907. It was officially called the Resurrection of Christ Church, but became affectionately known as the Church of Our Saviour on Spilled Blood. The church was closed for services in the 1930s, when the Bolsheviks went on the offensive against religion. When it was decided to permit services again, it underwent a full restoration, taking over 30 years, and was finally reopened in 1997 in all its dazzling former glory. This building next to it is the church hospital.
Crossing the River Neva again, we can look back on the Hermitage Museum. We arrive at the battleship Aurora, built in 1901. During the First World War, the ship operated in the Baltic Sea. At the end of 1916, she was moved to Petrograd, the renamed St. Petersburg, for a major repair. The city was brimming with revolutionary ferment, and part of her crew joined the 1917 February Revolution. A committee was created on the ship, with Alexander Belshiev elected as its captain. Most of the crew joined the Bolsheviks, who were preparing for a communist revolution. 25th October 1917, Aurora refused to carry out an order to put to sea, which sparked the October Revolution. At 9:45 p.m. on that date, a blank shot from her forecastle gun signaled the start of the assault on the Winter Palace, which was to be the last episode of the October Revolution. The cruiser's crew took part in the attack. Note the steam-powered lifeboat and the ship's flag, which I cannot trace on the internet.
Opposite the Aurora, one of the many colourfully painted buildings of St. Petersburg. This came about as a result of an edict from the Tsar. St. Petersburg is claimed to be the city with the most rainfall, and the climate can be very grey, so buildings had to be painted in bright colours to relieve the gloom.
Back on the ship to change before our evening out, there is time to watch the sun set alongside a power station.
I was about 7 when I saw a film of the Bolshoi Ballet dancing Swan Lake. Romantically, I wanted to see it live in St. Petersburg where it had been filmed. The evening out was a choice between the ballet or a night of Russian folklore presented by the military academy. Having seen Swan Lake and the Nutcracker many times, we decided that the Russian folklore would be something new for us. The evening turned out to be a fantastic night's entertainment. I'll let these excerpts speak and sing for themselves. What a fabulous evening!
The next day, on the way to Catherine's Winter Palace, we passed this mosque on the outskirts of the city. These two pictures show you the Winter Palace from the air. The second has a white outline showing how little of it we covered in about 3 hours.
The double-headed eagle Romanov crest above the main gates to the Winter Palace.
Through the gates one is faced with the main wing of the palace. There are a further 11 sets of windows on either side, and then side wings of 12 sets of windows. The Winter Palace has 1,786 doors, 1,945 windows, 1,500 rooms, and 117 staircases.
Onion towers built above the grand church within the palace. To cover all the gilding in the palace requires 65 tons of gold leaf. The expense cannot be met these days, and much of the gilding is now gold paint.
Looking back to the main gates from within the palace courtyard. Gail kitted out with her shoe covers. These are issued to help protect the wooden floors.
The palace was built in the early 1700s and cost over 12 million rubles at the time. It is not possible to put an equivalent cost in today's money. Suffice to say, it could never be built again.
The palace was extensively damaged during the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, with much of the contents being removed to Moscow, from where they were, in later years, restored to the palace, which is now a museum. Following the 1941-43 siege of Leningrad, when the palace suffered serious damage, a restoration policy was enacted, which has fully restored it. As the Russian government has become more tolerant, the palace has had the emblems of the Romanovs restored. The gilded and crowned double-headed eagles once more adorn the walls, balconies, and gates. The Winter Palace is no longer the hub of a great empire, and the Romanovs no longer reside there, but the crowned Russian eagle serves as a reminder of the palace's imperial history. I couldn't help wondering if this lady's breasts were modelled on the results of the first breast implant. Their headlamp quality is impressive.
The Winter Palace was a cold place to live. These Delft-tile Dutch-made heaters dominated the rooms, and attendants would keep them stoked while the Tsar and his family were in residence.
Peter I, who styled himself as Peter the Great, who died in 1725.
His wife, Catherine I, who ruled from Peter's death in 1725 until her own in 1727, so obsessed with her wealth that she never wore the same clothing twice, and during the construction of the castle often had newly built sections demolished because they were not up to her standard, or she just changed her mind. The Baltic glassworks are famous for their blue glass, many examples of which can be found in the rooms of the palace.
An exquisite marquetry roll-top desk in the Tsar's living quarters, with the detail of the intricate work it contains.
How to decorate your walls when money is no object. These are canvases by the great masters, stuck on the walls like wallpaper. None of the finesse of frames or anything like that.
In the room of Peter I, his helmet with the double-headed Romanov eagle. Imagine the strong neck muscles you would need to hold your head high with this weight on your head. He lived a very Spartan existence, as his bedroom shows. Windows were left open even on the coldest nights to harden the body.
The Amber Room. This is a recreation from photographs and paintings. The 6 panels disappeared during the World War II siege of Leningrad by the Germans and have never been found. 600 tons of amber were required to make the restoration complete. No photographs allowed, but we had these given to us.
Outside again, on the opposite side of the palace, we have a last view of the domes of the palace church before taking our bus back to our ship. Taken on a back route due to traffic jams in the city, and past this blue-roofed church before entering an industrial area where we see this welded robot advertising exhaust systems.
We never did find out what this running, or perhaps ice skating, couple were meant to be doing, or why in the world there would be a street sign indicating that they should run.
We could understand that this sign was for a pedestrian crossing.
But how would a blind person see this crossing was there for him? Okay, it's for the carer and indicates that the crossing also has, for want of a better expression, stop and go noises.
Truck art, St. Petersburg style.
And electrical connections the easy way.
A selection of buildings, very drab and of poor workmanship, as we weave our way through the suburbs on the way back to the ship, which we find has been joined in the harbour by 4 of the floating bricks, which carry so many passengers it becomes a nightmare to go on tour.
From the sublime to the ridiculous, from 345 passengers on the Spirit to over 2,500 on each of the big new arrivals. A very thorough passport control with few staff made for long queues. Thank goodness we were on a small ship. Lunch over, and we start a boat trip through some of the canals into the River Neva to end at the church on the Spilled Blood, which we will have time to visit.
Cartier, St. Petersburg. One of the pair of rostral columns on the River Neva, which are generally erected to celebrate a major naval victory. However, these, completed in 1811, are merely lighthouses, the brazier fires in the top having been replaced by a gas flame.
A jet-powered ferry on hydrofoils passes at high speed, but with minimum wake, making them ideal for river traffic.
The Peter and Paul Fortress, ideally situated to control all river traffic into and out of St. Petersburg.
The closest we got to the main mosque at St. Petersburg, an impressive-looking building. A modern cruising boat contrasts with the more conservative, older building.
The battleship Aurora, seen from our canal boat. Many of the bridges have ornate decorations, such as this large shield in stone or this smaller brass plate.
Canal side, there are many activities taking place, and we spot this artist concentrating on her current work. It's Wednesday, and so a very popular day for getting married, as you get your wedding day and the next 2 days off work. And as most people work from Monday to Friday, this maximizes your honeymoon time. This couple have come to the church on the Spilt Blood for their photographs.
The magical domes of the church on the Spilled Blood, yet the world so nearly lost this masterpiece. During the siege of Leningrad in World War II by Nazi German military forces, the church was used as a temporary morgue for those who died in combat or from starvation and illness. The church suffered significant damage. After the war, it was used as a warehouse for vegetables, leading to the sardonic name of the Saviour on potatoes. Then again, the world nearly lost this masterpiece. In 1967, the descendants of the mad Bolsheviks again proposed demolition of this increasingly popular monument to Christianity, but sanity ruled, and by 1969 a preservation order was made on the building, leading to a 30-year restoration project of the only purely Russian building in St. Petersburg. Inside this enclosure of lazurite and lapis lazuli, the cobblestones of the street where Tsar Alexander II was assassinated in 1881, This part of the church had to be built over the street to enclose and enshrine this spot.
Outside, a golden canopy shields the window, allowing light in to illuminate the shrine built over the cobblestones where the Tsar died. Stepping back, we can take in the magnificent main edifice of the Church of the Saviour on Spilled Blood. Time to reflect as we look at the external features and more of the thousands of mosaics decorating the building.
A city tram with the buildings of the fortress of Peter and Paul in the background.
Taken from the bus, we can only tell you that this is one of the many churches in the city. Back 3 rows of rotting, dilapidated tower blocks to take to the high seas once again. Our leaving image of the other luxury cruise liners contrasts strongly with the run-down city we have just left behind.
As we sail past the naval base at Kronstadt, we can see the dome of the Church of the Naval Cathedral of St. Nicholas. Closed as a church from 1929 to 2005, it is now used only on special occasions. A few tattered ships remain, reflecting on the previous glory of the Russian Navy.
A signal tower to control the movement of ships and the nearby Fort Alexander. The fort held a garrison of up to 1,000 men, and there are 103 cannon ports with additional space on the roof of 34 guns. Built to guard the Baltic waterway to St. Petersburg, south of the naval base, Kronstadt, on the island of Kotlin, in combination with Fort Peter I, Fort Pavel I, Fort Kronstadt, and Fort Constantin. It was never directly involved in any military defense activity.
Between 2005 and 2010, the St. Petersburg Dam navigation floodgate for the main shipping channel in the Gulf of Finland was constructed, and these huge gates can be swung into the navigation channel to cut St. Petersburg off from any wave surge in the Gulf.
As a speeding boat passes us, we exit the barrage and cruise overnight to Tallinn in Estonia.